We're pushing on with more finish work on the frame, making some questionable controller cover decisions, spending way too much time on graphics, and hopefully finally making some panels to cover this frame. It's a lot, so let's go. I finally wanted to mount this controller, and to make it easier to attach and remove the controller, I figured it'd be a good idea to actually weld these bolts to the frame. I also spent way too much time going over some of the welds that I had just kind of put in place, but I really needed to finish up, and I'm still not even completely done with that, but I'm at least making some progress. I've already shown you guys a ton of welding, and a lot of this I'm just going over parts I've already gone over just for more reinforcement. Very thankfully, I am pretty much done with all the frame fabrication, so unless there's anything more major, you probably won't see any more of it, even if I'm going to be doing a lot more in the background. This is honestly my least favorite episode so far in this series, mostly because I spent a ton of time and I don't really have a lot to show you guys. Of course, every major project has its ups and downs, and this is definitely one of the down parts of this project, but I'm hoping I can get past it and in the future episodes make much more progress. I definitely want to show you guys all the steps that I'm taking from start to finish, but if there are some things that I have to redo or go over a bunch of times, I don't really want to waste your time showing you all that. So I did spend the better part of my usable time for this project all week just filling in welds and gaps and holes and attaching these rear pieces even more. The welding is almost fully completed, I just have a little more to do. I did tell you guys I was going to fix these seat extensions, and that's exactly what I'm doing here, just making sure everything is a lot more lined up because they were a bit off. I also fixed off camera that small little vent in the back that wasn't quite symmetrical. I lined that one up a little bit better, and overall I just spent a ton of time just cleaning this up, and I didn't want to show you all of it because you guys have already seen that stuff. So let's move on to something new. We're going to be covering these holes in the frame with some etched acrylic. I could have just gotten these dimensions from the 3D model that I made a few episodes back, but because this is now handmade, it's not going to be exact. I could have used cardboard to make this mock-up of all the shapes, but I figured blue tape might actually be easier to work with. Once I have all these real-world panels mocked up, I can then remove them from the frame and then measure each panel and input those coordinates into the computer. It's still probably not going to line up exactly, but I feel like this will be a lot closer than if I just went off the 3D model, because certainly things have changed during all my welding. Not only do all these panels need to be cut in the right size, but they also need to be bent along certain areas, and that's why I'm using those dotted lines to indicate some bends. Now that my controller bolts are all welded up in the correct further up position, I can then move on to figuring out how I'm going to protect and cover this controller. The original idea I had, which was just to add some spacers to kind of have the controller cover stand off a bit to allow room for not only the wires but also the controller itself, I just really wasn't liking how that was turning out. I didn't like the gap between the controller cover and the frame. To me, it didn't look as finished as I would like. I figured if I could make more room for the controller, I might be able to use it in its original position. So all I have to do is cut out the top and the sides, which doesn't leave a lot left for protecting the controller, but I was going to make some panels to go over those open holes with acrylic. This would also allow me to add some spacers or standoffs so that the acrylic was sitting further away from the top. Looking back, I probably should have just cut this all out with the angle grinder, but this sheet metal is very thin and that makes it pretty wobbly when you're trying to make accurate cuts with the grinder. So I figured I'd just cut out the bulk of the metal with some tin snips and then clean it all up with either the Dremel or the grinder. And just about right here is when I realized that I also hated this idea. So this piece has just become Swiss cheese so much that I don't like it anymore and I don't want to use it. This idea actually would have worked out pretty well had I just known this is how I wanted to do it from the start, but I already cut the sides up and that made it even more flimsy, and sure, I could fix it with the welder, but I think I just want to move on. Okay, so after a ton of measuring and then coming up with this new controller cover design made entirely out of acrylic. I then spent many more hours creating all these graphics to go on top of them, and hopefully this will turn out okay, because if it's not, then I have to figure out some other solution for the controller cover, but at least I have the panels for the top brace, and that should work out pretty well. I could have gone with a clear acrylic, and I did contemplate doing that because I do think it would look really cool, but I also thought what would be cool was to do this on some smoke gray, which is semi-transparent, but it does have like a charcoal or dark tint to it. I have used this prior in other builds and it did come out looking really good. The only thing is it's much more subtle than the clear. I was trying to finish all the panels to show you guys kind of like the completed at least set of them, but each panel pretty much takes about 20 to 30 minutes, and when you have like 7 of them, that time adds up. I'm doing that technique where I print in reverse so that when you flip the panel over, you're seeing through the acrylic to the print on the bottom side. I think this makes the etching look a lot cleaner and crisper because it's kind of like you have a lens that you're seeing through it. The only thing to watch out for is that if you're using tinted acrylic like this, then it makes all of the etching that you have also tinted, so there's not a high contrast, which I do think looks cool, but it might not be the look that I'm going for. I might want a bit more contrast. Another thing was some of my measurements were not perfect. This just barely does not fit this little battery meter. I was going to put it right here, so I'm going to have to modify that a little bit. I actually measured it correctly, but there was a little lip around it and I didn't account for that. I was going to end the video right there, but I really wasn't happy with it, so I decided to take another day and try to get more progress done. I was up until 4 a.m. just trying to finish on time, but unfortunately I spent so much time in the beginning just doing some welds and stuff I couldn't really show you that I didn't have enough time to actually make some more progress that I did want to show you guys. So I decided to change directions, and I'm actually going to be having the etching on the outside so you can see it with more contrast. I might have to redo that top panel that I had just previously shown you because I don't exactly have the same exact tint of gray, and even though you can't really tell on camera, in person the top one is a bit more brown and the other panels are more gray. I actually like the more gray, so I might redo that top panel again. Here you can see the effects of etching on the outside instead of going through the acrylic, and I actually like this for this build a bit more. Not only do you have the color contrast, but you also have the matte finish versus the reflective finish, and I think it looks really cool in the light. I reused this top panel, so I just etched the other side, and no, it doesn't line up perfectly. It kind of looks cool like a drop shadow, but I might redo this entire panel anyway, so this is still up in the air. I might even try going with just a fully clear top and having the tinted on the sides. I don't know, it might look cool, it might look more clashing, so I'm still trying to figure out what's going to be the best look. Those are the two side panels, and here's the very front panel, which is going to house 3 switches for the lighting and accessories. And here's my controller cover design. As you can see, I was actually having some issues with my engraver. It has never done this before. I think the belt might be loose or old or skipping, so I'm going to have to figure out that problem too. I am going to end up redoing that bottom controller panel anyway because I actually wanted a longer piece, but this was all I had at the time. Aside from the side supports here, I'm going to be bending the bottom panel and all the other panels with the heat gun, so it's not going to be just totally flat like that. I thought of a bunch of ways that I could attach these panels to the frame, and one of them was just using some screw-in magnets, but I figured they might come off over the bumps and maybe at high speeds. I could also just use some double-sided tape or even just glue them on, but I try to shy away from adhesives whenever I can. I will have to bend these panels. As you can see, they're not going to lay flat because obviously the frame is not flat, so once I get my heat gun on these, I will be able to conform them to the frame and they should fit pretty well. I'm just going to drill and tap the frame first, and if that fails or doesn't work, then I'm going to try using some riv nuts, and those are a lot bigger though, so I'd rather just be able to cut into the frame and just screw them in directly, but I'm gonna try a few things. Hopefully that just worked. I am really happy with how the controller cover design came out. Of course, I'm going to be redoing that bottom panel anyway, so don't worry about that. I'm also going to bend both ends of the panel, so they're not going to be just flying out flat like that. On the next episode, I will be bending and mounting these to the frame, so you'll be able to see that completed. I'm also going to be continuing to finish up the frame with the welding, so hopefully we can start painting pretty soon. We are making our way closer to the end. The only real things I have left to do is figuring out the side panels, painting it, electronics and lights, and then finally putting it all together. As always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you guys think about these panels and how they're coming out. Should I left them more subtle? Do you like the more contrast? Let me know. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.